Look at her hands shaking as she pulls out her last $5. That's her bus fare home. That's her food for tomorrow. That's all she has left in this world. And she's about to give it to an old man she's never met. Her boss is screaming at her. Everyone's watching. She's about to get fired. But she can't stop herself. And that one choice, that one moment of kindness when she had absolutely nothing to give, is about to trigger something so incredible, you won't believe it's real. Don't skip this story. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Let me tell you about Sarah Mitchell. 23 years old, working the dinner shift at Romano's Bistro in downtown Seattle. You know the type of place: fancy tablecloths, overpriced pasta, customers who snap their fingers at you like you're invisible. Sarah wasn't supposed to be there. 6 months earlier, she was in her second year of college, studying to become a teacher. She had dreams. She had plans. Then one rainy November night, a drunk driver ran a red light and took both her parents in an instant. Just like that, her world collapsed. Her 15-year-old sister Emma was all she had left. Sweet Emma, who loved to paint and wanted to be an artist someday. But Emma's left arm had been shattered in the same accident. The doctors said she needed surgery. Expensive surgery that their insurance wouldn't fully cover. Physical therapy too. Thousands and thousands of dollars that Sarah didn't have. So Sarah dropped out of school. She sold their parents' car. She moved them into a tiny apartment in the cheaper part of town where the heating barely worked. And she took every shift she could get at Romano's, working under a manager named Rick Torres. Rick was the kind of man who smiled at customers and terrorized his staff. 32 years old, always wearing cologne so strong it made your eyes water. He lived for the power trip of bossing around young servers who couldn't afford to quit. This particular Friday night, Sarah was exhausted. The kind of tired that goes beyond your body and settles into your soul. She had exactly $5.30 to her name. A cash tip from lunch tucked into her apron pocket. That $5 was her bus fare home. It was the bread and milk she planned to buy on the way. It was all she had until payday next Thursday. The restaurant was busy, filled with the usual crowd. Tech workers celebrating something, couples on dates, tourists who thought Romano's was authentic Italian food. Sarah moved through the tables like a ghost, smiling on autopilot, refilling water glasses, pretending everything was fine. Then the door opened. An old man shuffled in from the rain. He must have been in his 70s, maybe older. His coat was expensive once, you could tell by the fabric, but now it was worn and soaked through. His white hair was plastered to his head. He walked with a slight limp, no umbrella, no bag. Just a man who looked like he'd gotten lost somewhere along the way. Rick spotted him immediately and called Sarah over with a sharp whistle that made her flinch. "Put him in the back corner," Rick said, not even trying to lower his voice. "Near the kitchen door. And if he doesn't order within 5 minutes, tell him to leave. I don't need homeless people scaring away my real customers." Sarah felt something twist in her stomach. "He's a customer, Rick. He just came in from the rain. He's bad for business. Back corner. Now." Sarah took a menu and walked over to the old man. Up close, she could see he was trembling, not from fear or illness, but from cold. Seattle in March is no joke, especially when you're soaked to the bone. "Good evening, sir," Sarah said, and she meant it. She gave him a real smile, the first genuine one she'd managed all night. "Let's get you somewhere warm." She ignored Rick's instructions completely. Instead, she led the old man to the booth right next to the fireplace, the best seat in the house, usually reserved for big tippers. The old man looked surprised. "Thank you, miss. You're very kind. Can I get you some coffee? Tea? Something to warm you up?" "Just water, please," he said. His voice was rough, like he hadn't spoken to anyone in days. "And maybe, do you have soup? Anything hot would be wonderful. We have minestrone. It's actually pretty good. I'll bring you a big bowl." As Sarah walked away, she could feel Rick's eyes burning into her back. She knew she'd hear about this later. Putting a bum, Rick's word, not hers, in the premium booth during dinner rush. But when she glanced back at the old man warming his hands by the fire, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. She brought him the soup, extra bread on the side, even though it cost extra. She'd pay the difference from her tips if Rick noticed. The old man ate slowly, carefully, savoring every spoonful like it was the best meal he'd had in weeks. Sarah kept checking on him between tables. There was something about him, a dignity, a sadness, something that reminded her of her own grandfather. When he finally finished, he sat back with a deep sigh and called her over. "The bill, please, miss." Sarah printed the receipt, $8.75 with tax, and placed it in the black folder. The old man reached into his coat pocket. Then he patted his other pocket. Then his pants pockets. His movements became faster, more frantic. Sarah's heart sank. She knew that panic. She'd felt it herself standing at the grocery store checkout, counting coins, realizing you didn't have enough. "I don't understand," the old man whispered, his face going pale. "My wallet. I had it this morning. I must have left it somewhere." Before Sarah could say anything, Rick appeared like a shark smelling blood. "Problem here?" Rick's voice was loud, intentionally loud, drawing attention from nearby tables. The old man looked up, humiliated. "I seem to have misplaced my wallet, sir. I apologize. If I could just make a phone call, or perhaps come back tomorrow." Rick laughed. Actually laughed. "Come back tomorrow? That's the oldest scam in the book, Grandpa. You eat the food, you pay for the food. That's how restaurants work. I'm not trying to cheat anyone." "Sarah," Rick turned to her with a cold smile. "Call the police. We've got a dine-and-dash situation here." The restaurant went quiet. You know that feeling when something uncomfortable is happening and everyone pretends not to watch, but they're absolutely watching? That's what happened. The couple at the next table stopped mid-conversation. The business guys in the corner looked over. Even the kitchen staff peeked through the service window. The old man was shaking harder now, and Sarah couldn't tell if it was from cold or fear or shame. Probably all three. He was 70-something years old, and Rick was threatening to have him arrested over a bowl of soup. "Rick, stop," Sarah said, stepping between them. "This is ridiculous. Look at him. He's not a criminal. He just forgot his wallet." "That's not your call to make," Rick snapped. "This is my restaurant, and I'm not running a charity for people who—" "It's $8. Sarah's voice came out louder than she intended. $8 for soup. "Then you pay it," Rick said, and his smile got wider. He was enjoying this. "If you're so concerned, you pay for him. Otherwise, step aside and let me handle this." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah looked at Rick's smug face. She looked at the old man's trembling hands. She thought about Emma at home, waiting for her. She thought about the $5 in her pocket, her bus fare, her groceries, her safety net until payday. If she gave Rick that money, she'd have to walk home. For miles in the rain. She'd arrive soaking wet at 11 at night. She wouldn't be able to buy bread or milk. Emma would ask if she'd eaten dinner, and Sarah would have to lie again. The smart thing would be to walk away. To let Rick call the police and let them sort it out. To protect herself first because nobody else was going to protect her. But Sarah couldn't stop seeing her grandfather's face in this stranger's eyes. "Yes," Sarah heard herself say. "I'll pay for him." She reached into her apron with shaking hands and pulled out the crumpled $5 bill. All she had in the world. She smoothed it out on the table and added the coins from her pocket, quarters, dimes, nickels, pennies, counting out exactly $8.75. She placed it in the bill folder and slid it across the table to Rick. "There. Paid in full." Rick snatched up the folder and counted the money twice, like he couldn't believe it. When he looked up at Sarah, there was something ugly in his eyes. Not anger, worse. Contempt. "You just paid for a stranger's meal with your last dollar," Rick said slowly. "Do you have any idea how stupid that is? How are you getting home tonight, Sarah? How are you buying food? Do you think being nice is going to pay your bills?" Sarah didn't answer. She couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. "You know what?" Rick continued. "I've had enough of your attitude. You ignore my instructions. You waste time on customers who don't tip. You just cost this restaurant money. You're fired. Get your stuff and get out." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Fired. No job meant no money for Emma's surgery. No rent payment. No food. They'd be homeless within a week. "Rick, please. Get out." Sarah looked around desperately, hoping someone would speak up, would say this was unfair. But people just stared at their plates. The old man was trying to stand, trying to say something, but his voice was too weak to carry. Sarah untied her apron with numb fingers. She laid it carefully on the table where the old man sat, as if folding it properly would somehow preserve her dignity. Then she walked toward the door. "Miss," the old man's voice cracked. "Miss, please wait." But Sarah couldn't stop. If she stopped, she'd cry. If she cried, Rick would see, and she couldn't give him that satisfaction. She pushed through the door into the rain. The old man struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on the edge of the table. He watched through the window as Sarah disappeared into the darkness, her thin jacket already soaked through. Then he turned and looked at Rick with eyes that had suddenly gone cold. Ice cold. The kind of cold that comes from power and wealth and knowing exactly what you're capable of. "Young man," the old man said quietly, "you just made the biggest mistake of your life." Rick snorted. "Is that a threat, old-timer? You want me to call the cops after all?" "No need," the old man said. He reached into his inner coat pocket, not the ones he'd checked before, and pulled out a phone. Not just any phone. The latest model, in a custom leather case. He dialed a number from memory. "Jonathan, it's me." "Yes, I know it's late. Listen carefully. I need the acquisition team mobilized tonight. I want to buy a building." He paused, his eyes never leaving Rick's face. "The one at 1847 Pine Street. The one that houses Romano's Bistro. I don't care what it costs. Double the asking price if you have to. I want the deed by morning." Rick's face went from smug to confused to pale in about 5 seconds. The old man made another call. And another. And another. With each call, Rick looked sicker. Finally, the old man pocketed his phone and headed toward the door. He moved differently now, still using his limp, but with the bearing of someone used to being obeyed. At the door, he turned back one last time. "My name," he said, "is Thomas Whitmore. Perhaps you've heard of it. I own Whitmore Industries. We manufacture medical equipment, among other things. We employ about 40,000 people worldwide. And tomorrow morning, you're going to wish you'd shown a little more kindness to that young lady." He walked out into the rain, leaving Rick standing frozen in the middle of his restaurant, finally understanding that the homeless bum he'd just humiliated was one of the richest men in the Pacific Northwest. Sarah walked through the rain for an hour and 20 minutes. Every step was a squelch of cold water against blistered feet. Her canvas shoes had holes in them. She'd been meaning to buy new ones, but kept putting it off because Emma needed things more. The streets of Seattle at night are different depending on which neighborhood you're in. Downtown, where Romano's was, everything is bright and bustling. People in expensive coats hurrying between bars and restaurants, taxis splashing through puddles, the smell of coffee and money. But as Sarah walked further from downtown, the lights got dimmer. The buildings got older. The people on the streets looked more like her. Tired, worn down, just trying to survive another day. She passed a convenience store and stopped outside, staring through the window at the bread on the shelves. Her stomach cramped with hunger. She'd worked an 8-hour shift and hadn't eaten anything except a handful of crackers she'd snuck from the break room. But she had no money. Zero. Not even a quarter for a phone call. She kept walking. By the time Sarah reached their apartment building, it was almost 11. The building was old, built in the 70s, with peeling paint and a front door that didn't lock properly. Their unit was on the 3rd floor, no elevator, of course, so Sarah climbed the stairs on legs that felt like rubber. She paused outside their door, taking a shaky breath. She had to compose herself. Emma couldn't know. Emma blamed herself enough already for the medical bills, for Sarah dropping out of school, for everything. Sarah wiped her face, fixed her wet hair as best she could, and opened the door with a smile. "Emma, I'm home." The apartment was tiny, just one bedroom that Emma used, and a living room where Sarah slept on a pull-out couch. But it was clean. Sarah made sure of that. Clean and warm and safe, even if it wasn't much. Emma was on the couch, her left arm in its brace, a sketchbook balanced on her lap. At 15, she had their mother's dark hair and their father's gentle eyes. When she saw Sarah, her face lit up. "Sarah, I was getting worried. You're soaking wet." "The bus was delayed," Sarah lied smoothly, kicking off her ruined shoes and hiding them in the closet. "Crazy rain out there. How was your day?" "Good. Look, I finished the drawing I was working on." Emma held up her sketchbook. It was a portrait of their parents, drawn from an old photo, and it was beautiful. Even with her injured hand making it difficult, Emma had talent. "That's incredible, Em," Sarah said, and she meant it. "They'd be so proud of you." Emma's smile faltered a little. "How was work? Did you get good tips?" "It was fine. Busy. You know how Friday nights are." Sarah moved into their little kitchenette, opening cabinets to hide her face. "Did you eat dinner?" "I wasn't that hungry. I saved the leftover rice for you." Sarah's heart broke. Emma was lying. She'd skipped dinner to save food, just like Sarah had been skipping meals to make sure Emma ate enough. "I had a big meal at work," Sarah lied again. "The chef made too much pasta and let us have the extra. I'm stuffed. You eat the rice, okay?" You sure? Positive. Go ahead. While Emma reheated the rice, Sarah went to their shared bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair plastered to her head. She'd lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. But the worst part was the look in her own eyes. Defeat. Fear. The desperate exhaustion of someone who's been running on empty for too long. She turned on the shower, not to get in, but to cover the sound, and let herself cry. Quiet, shaking sobs that she muffled with a towel. She gave herself exactly 5 minutes. 5 minutes to fall apart. Then she washed her face, pulled herself together, and went back out to be strong for Emma. That night, lying on her pull-out couch after Emma went to bed, Sarah stared at the ceiling and did math in her head. Math that didn't add up no matter how she calculated it. Rent due in 5 days, $850. Money in her account, $0. Emma's physical therapy appointment next week, $200, not covered by insurance. Groceries needed, at least $50. And now no job. No income. No way forward. She thought about the old man at the restaurant. Had she done the right thing? $8 wouldn't have saved her. She was drowning in thousands of dollars of debt. But at least she'd have had bus fare. At least she'd have had something. But then she remembered his trembling hands. The shame in his eyes. The way Rick had laughed at him. No. She'd done the right thing. Even if it cost her everything, she'd done the right thing. Sarah rolled over and tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. Tomorrow she'd have to start looking for a new job. She'd have to figure out how to feed Emma. She'd have to call their landlord and beg for an extension. She'd have to keep going, because what other choice did she have? What Sarah didn't know, couldn't know, was that across the city, in a penthouse apartment overlooking Puget Sound, Thomas Whitmore was making phone calls that would change her life forever. He hadn't gone home after leaving the restaurant. He'd gone straight to his office. At 76 years old, Thomas should have been retired, but he'd built Whitmore Industries from nothing, and he couldn't quite let it go. Medical equipment manufacturing, surgical instruments, hospital technology. His company equipped half the hospitals in North America. He was worth approximately $3 billion. He could buy a car without checking the price. He could buy a house without checking the price. He could buy a building that housed a restaurant, which is exactly what he did at 4 a.m. But he wasn't thinking about money. He was thinking about a young woman with kind eyes who'd given away her last $5 to save a stranger from humiliation. Get me everything, Thomas told his assistant, Harrison, over the phone. I want to know about Sarah Mitchell. I want to know about her family, her situation, everything. And Harrison? I want solutions ready by morning. Sarah woke up at 7 to the sound of her phone ringing. Unknown number. Probably a bill collector. She almost didn't answer, but what if it was a job opportunity? She'd sent out 20 applications last month. Hello. Is this Sarah Mitchell? A professional woman's voice. Yes, this is Sarah. Miss Mitchell, my name is Catherine Reed. I'm calling on behalf of Whitmore Industries. We have a rather unusual situation, and we need to speak with you in person. Would you be available to meet this morning at 9? Sarah sat up, confused. Whitmore Industries. The medical equipment company? I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong person. I didn't apply for any positions at. This isn't about employment, Miss Mitchell. This is about a personal matter. We'll send a car to pick you up at 8:30. Your address is 422 Grove Street, apartment 3B, correct? How did they know where she lived? Yes, but. Excellent. The car will be a black sedan. The driver's name is Robert. Please bring your sister Emma with you. This concerns her as well. The line went dead. Sarah stared at her phone. A car? Whitmore Industries. This had to be some kind of scam, right? But how would scammers know about Emma? At 8:30, Sarah and Emma stood by their apartment window, watching the street. Emma was nervous, bouncing on her good foot. What if it's about the hospital bills? Emma whispered. What if they're going to sue us? They don't send cars for that, Sarah said, trying to sound confident. They just send letters. Then a black sedan pulled up. Not a beat-up taxi or a rideshare. Actual luxury car with a driver in a suit who got out and looked up at their building. That's for us? Emma's eyes went wide. They went downstairs. The driver, Robert, was professional and kind. He opened the door for them, made sure they were comfortable, and didn't ask questions. The car was warm and smelled like leather and money, so different from the cold, wet buses Sarah was used to. They drove back toward downtown, but instead of stopping at some office building, They pulled up in front of Romano's bistro. Sarah's stomach dropped. "Why are we here?" "You'll see, miss," Robert said, opening their door. The street in front of Romano's was blocked. Not with traffic cones or police cars, but with vehicles that made Sarah's jaw drop. Luxury cars, Mercedes, BMWs, Teslas, lined both sides of the street. At least 30 of them. And standing in front of Romano's, waiting, was a group of people in expensive clothes. Business people. Important-looking people. And at the center of them, looking healthy and rested and nothing like the trembling old man from last night, was Thomas Whitmore. Sarah recognized him from news articles she'd seen. One of Seattle's richest men. The old man from the restaurant. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. Thomas saw her and smiled. He walked over, and the entire group followed him like he was a king and they were his court. "Sarah," Thomas said warmly, taking her hands. "Thank you for coming. And you must be Emma." He turned to Sarah's sister. "Your sister told me you're an artist. We'll have to talk about that." "I don't understand," Sarah said. "Last night you said your name was. I didn't know you were." "I apologize for the deception," Thomas said. "I have a habit of walking around the city without security sometimes. My wallet actually was stolen, picked out of my pocket on the bus, we think. Everything you saw was real, including your extraordinary kindness." The door to Romano's opened, and Rick stepped out. His face was pale, and he looked like he hadn't slept. When he saw the crowd, he froze. "Mr. Whitmore," Rick stammered. "Sir, I want to apologize for last night. If I had known who you were—" "That's precisely the problem," Thomas interrupted, his voice going cold. "If you'd known who I was, you would have treated me well. But you saw an old man with no money, and you treated him like garbage. Worse, you fired the only person in your establishment who understood what hospitality actually means." Thomas turned to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you all to meet Sarah Mitchell. Last night, this young woman gave me her last $5. Money she needed to get home, money she needed to feed herself and her sister, because she couldn't stand to see someone humiliated over a bowl of soup." The crowd looked at Sarah with respect. Some were smiling. One older woman had tears in her eyes. "Sarah," Thomas continued, "I did some research last night. I learned about your parents, about Emma's injury, about the medical bills and the dropped college classes and the 60-hour work weeks. I learned that you've been drowning, and yet you still chose kindness." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "As of 6 this morning, I own this building. I've terminated Romano's lease. Mr. Torres no longer works here." Rick made a choking sound. "But the building needs a tenant," Thomas said. "Someone who understands that a restaurant should be a place of warmth and welcome. Someone who treats people like people, regardless of what's in their wallet." He held out the envelope to Sarah. "So I'm offering you a 5-year lease at $1 per year. You'll run this place however you want. We'll cover renovation costs, initial inventory, everything you need to start." Sarah couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "That's not all," Thomas said gently. "Emma, I spoke with Dr. Patricia Chin this morning. She's the best orthopedic surgeon in the state. She's agreed to perform your surgery next week, at no cost. Physical therapy is covered too. Everything." Emma burst into tears. "And Sarah," Thomas said, "Whitmore Industries would like to offer you a grant, full tuition and living expenses to finish your degree. You can go back to school. You can become the teacher you wanted to be." Sarah's legs gave out. She would have fallen if Thomas hadn't steadied her. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" Thomas's eyes grew misty. "Because 50 years ago, I was a young man with nothing. I was trying to start a business, and I couldn't afford to eat. A waitress, her name was Dorothy, bought me a sandwich with her own money. She didn't know me. She just saw someone who needed help." He smiled. "I never forgot her. I looked for her for years, but I never found her. I couldn't repay her kindness. But I can pay it forward. Through you." 6 months later, Sarah stood in front of what used to be Romano's bistro. The sign was different now. It read Dorothy's Place in warm, welcoming letters, named after the waitress who'd helped Thomas so many years ago. The restaurant was beautiful. They'd kept the fireplace, but torn out everything cold and pretentious. Now it had warm wood tables, local art on the walls, including several of Emma's paintings, and a kitchen that smelled like comfort food and home. But the most important feature was the booth by the fireplace. There was a small brass plaque on the table. "This table is reserved for anyone who needs a meal. No questions asked. No payment required. Because everyone deserves kindness. Every single day, that table served free meals. Sometimes it was a homeless veteran. Sometimes it was a single parent stretched too thin. Sometimes it was a college student who'd run out of money before the end of the month. Sarah never asked questions. She just brought food and treated them with dignity. The restaurant was successful beyond anything Sarah had imagined. It turned out that people loved the idea of a place built on kindness. They came for the food, but they stayed for the feeling, the sense that they were part of something good. Emma was thriving. Her surgery had been a success, and after months of physical therapy, she had full use of her arm again. She was taking art classes at the community college and talking about applying to design school. She helped at the restaurant on weekends, and her paintings were actually selling to customers. And Sarah? She was back in school, taking online classes to finish her teaching degree. It was hard balancing school and the restaurant, but it was possible now. She wasn't drowning anymore. She could breathe. On this particular evening, a rainy Tuesday, Sarah was standing at the host's stand when the door opened. An older woman came in, shaking off an umbrella. She looked tired, worried, and her coat was worn thin. "Excuse me," the woman said hesitantly. "I saw the sign in the window about the free table. I don't usually. I'm not homeless or anything. My car broke down, and I spent my last money on the tow truck, and I haven't eaten since yesterday, and I'm sorry, this is so embarrassing." "You don't need to explain," Sarah said gently, taking the woman's arm. "Come with me. Let's get you warm and fed." She led the woman to the booth by the fireplace and brought her a bowl of hot soup and fresh bread. The woman cried as she ate, not from sadness but from relief. From the simple grace of being helped when you need it most. As Sarah turned to check on other tables, she saw a familiar figure sitting in the corner, Thomas Whitmore. He came by at least once a week, always sitting quietly, always leaving generous tips for the staff. He caught her eye and smiled, giving her a small nod of approval. Later, as the dinner rush was ending, Thomas came up to the counter where Sarah was reviewing receipts. "You've done something special here," Thomas said. "Dorothy would be proud." "I hope so," Sarah said. "Did you ever find out what happened to her? The waitress who helped you?" Thomas nodded slowly. "I hired investigators years ago. She passed away about 10 years after she helped me. Cancer. She was only 42. His voice grew thick. She left behind 3 kids. I found them, made sure they were taken care of, put them through college. But I never got to thank her personally." "I'm sure she knew," Sarah said. "Somehow, I think she knew." Thomas pulled out his wallet and removed something, a worn, faded $5 bill in a plastic sleeve. "This is the $5 you gave me 6 months ago. I had it preserved. I want you to have it back." "I can't take that," Sarah said. "It's not for you to keep. It's for you to remember. Remember what you did when you had nothing. Remember that kindness isn't about having extra to give. It's about giving even when you don't." He pressed it into her hand. "Hang it somewhere in the restaurant. Let it remind people that the smallest act can change the world." Sarah had the $5 bill framed and hung it above the fireplace with a small caption. "This is what changed everything." One evening, about a year after opening, something unexpected happened. The door opened and Rick Torres walked in. He looked different, thinner, older, humbled. He stood nervously by the entrance, like he might bolt at any second. Sarah's first instinct was anger. This was the man who'd fired her, who'd humiliated an old man over soup, who'd wielded his tiny amount of power like a weapon. But then she saw his hands were shaking. She saw the fear in his eyes. She remembered being scared and desperate herself. Sarah walked over. "Rick, I shouldn't be here," he said quickly. "I was just walking by, and I saw what you did with the place, and I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. You probably don't believe me, and I don't blame you, but I needed to say it." He turned to leave. "Rick, wait." Sarah's voice stopped him. "Have you eaten today?" He looked at the floor. Things have been hard since I got blacklisted. I'm working as a dishwasher now across town. It's fine, I deserve it, Come with me," Sarah said. She led him to the booth by the fireplace and brought him soup and bread. Rick stared at the food like he couldn't believe it was real. "Why are you being kind to me?" he whispered. "After what I did?" Sarah sat down across from him. "Because someone was kind to me when I needed it most. And I learned that kindness isn't something you earn. It's something you give freely, especially to people who don't deserve it. That's what makes it grace." Rick cried as he ate, and Sarah let him. Sometimes that's what people need, to be fed and to be seen and to know that they're not beyond redemption. As she walked back to the kitchen, Sarah caught Thomas watching from his usual corner. He raised his coffee cup to her in a silent toast. That night, after closing, Sarah stood in the empty restaurant and thought about everything that had happened. How one choice, to give away $5 she desperately needed, had somehow transformed her entire life. But more than that, it had created ripples. Emma was healing. Dozens of hungry people were fed every week. Staff members who'd been unemployed now had jobs where they were treated with respect. And even Rick, who'd been cruel and small, was learning what it meant to receive unearned kindness. Sarah walked over to the framed $5 bill and touched the glass gently. "Thank you, Dorothy," she whispered to a woman she'd never met. "Thank you for starting this. Because that's what kindness does. It doesn't end with one act. It ripples outward, touching lives you'll never know about, creating waves that reach shores you'll never see." That $5 bill wasn't just money. It was a seed. And what grew from it was a legacy of grace. So let me ask you something. What would you have done in Sarah's position? Would you have given your last $5 to a stranger? Would you have walked 4 miles in the rain for someone you didn't know? It's easy to say yes when it's a story. It's harder when it's your life, when it's your last dollar, when you're the one who's scared and hungry and desperate. But here's what I want you to remember. Kindness isn't about having extra to give. It's about giving even when you don't. You never know who you're helping. You never know what someone is carrying, what battle they're fighting, what hope they've lost. That old man on the bus, that waitress having a rough day, that person who dropped their groceries in the parking lot. They might be nobody special, or they might be someone who can change your life. But it doesn't matter. You help them anyway, because at the end of the day, we're all just people. We're all struggling with something. We're all scared of something. We're all hoping that when we stumble, someone will reach out a hand. Be that hand. Be the person who gives when you have nothing left to give. Be the person who sees people as people, not as what they can do for you. Be the person who chooses kindness, even when it costs you everything. Because sometimes, just sometimes, that kindness comes back to you in ways you never imagined. But even if it doesn't, even if no fleet of luxury cars ever shows up to save you, you'll know you did the right thing. And that's worth more than all the money in the world. If this story touched your heart, share it. Share it with someone who needs to believe in kindness today. Share it with someone who's struggling and needs to know that good things can still happen. Share it with someone who's forgotten that there's still beauty in this hard world. And the next time you see someone who needs help, really needs help, remember Sarah and her $5. Remember that you have the power to change someone's world. Use it. Thank you for listening to